Right, thanks everybody for the feedback so far as we talk about how we want to improve as a team, looking at how we prioritize, how we groom, what we can do with our meetings, what we can change, just general process, just throwing a lot of ideas out there. So the first topic was making sure it's explicit that story creation, prioritization, and contributing to the details and story breakdown of our backlog are owned and driven by engineers within this team. Part of the reason for asking this question is during this milestone and towards the end of the last milestone, there were a lot of questions from within the team, like, hey, what do we work on next? What issues should I pull in? And I'd like to shift that and work with product management to make sure we're in sync with what's the most important things that we should be working on. And the engineers on this team are closest to the code. They're closest to knowing where we can have the most impact on memory and performance improvements. And so making sure that you all feel a sense of ownership on where we can have the most impact in driving those initiatives forward. Lots of good suggestions in here if you haven't read it. So Matthias, you want to do a quick verbalization of your suggestions in here?
Yeah, I actually just realized the point pair thing, it should probably be under the how, not the what. I think I even said this in there, but I can talk about it anyway. Yes, because this is more about like how do you execute on a proposal, but the proposal or the way it worked at SoundCloud anyway, it would still come from product. I mean, except maybe if it was like a super technical thing. I do remember that was like this big problem we had with our Cassandra cluster that would like constantly fall over. And this is not something that's product initiated. So this was like a bigger, like a multi-month thing that engineers would do, but I would say that was the exception. So maybe I'm getting ahead of the agenda here, but because it's maybe more of the how, but the key idea is that that it's not the PMs or EMs even who are responsible for like doing things like story breakdowns. And specifically not like what are the individual action items, even down to MRs maybe that need to be sent, right? But basically the stuff that ends up on the board, right? So that was not really the job of the PM anymore, or PO, we call them product owners. But like what we had was we called a product requirements document, which was a really brief. It was a brief, like maybe 1 or 2 pages, very concise about, look, like this is what we want to build. Here's why. Here are the KPIs attached to this, because this is like why we think this might move the needle. But like kind of almost like bullet points, like really really broad. And then this would be quickly discussed with the whole team. And then engineers would take over from there. And so that like we would still be able to work on things in parallel. We would typically have only like up to 2 people. You want to have more than one because bus factor and everything, and knowledge sharing and all. But like, so we came up with this idea of point pairs. Then it's just like 2 engineers to take ownership of this particular one. I mean, an example would have been like the NDJs and stuff, right? So like just like super early on, identify, okay, this is what we want to do and why, and then we assign 2 people. And they basically look after the entire execution of the thing. And like one really important thing here is that it doesn't necessarily mean they need to build the whole thing. It's really more about make sure it gets done, one way or another. You're welcome to contribute, but like it might also mean, talk to your fellow coworkers about help, like, and make sure that stuff gets done, basically. That's pretty much it. It's like a very simple idea. Yeah, and it worked. I think it worked really well.
And just clarification on the title of point pairs, that means like taking point, not the pointing discussion that we have later on. So we're not talking like Fibonacci pointing.
Oh, no. It's not about estimation at all. Estimation was a very small component even. Like I think I said it here, like we would at most do t-shirt sizing. Sometimes we didn't estimate at all because we would more decide based on, is this like valuable from a business perspective rather than, because I mean, so we had like one hard requirement, which was, if it takes more than 3 months, we're not going to do it. There was like one hard requirement we had from execs. The rest was pretty much kind of open to us. So if we think it's valuable enough, then it didn't really matter if it took 2 weeks or 2 months. So we did at most t-shirt sizing because you need still kind of like some sense of how tight in are going to be people be for a quarter or whatever.
Agreed.
But yeah, so it's not about estimation. It's more about like breaking down the work and also identifying, because that's easier for engineers because they're deeper in the code base as well. It's easier for them to see, oh, okay, like we might have to touch this in this part of the code base, but that's a really smelly area. So maybe we should do it this or that way, or that might add a week of like, paying off tech debt and whatnot. So all this stuff, that was all in the hands of engineers.
Yeah. No, I like the idea, and I think we've tried to do that in fits and spurts throughout planning, right? Where we kind of pair up, like CI minutes is a good example of a recent one where Alexi and Camille worked on it.
Yep.
Atomic
Definitely.
processing, Nicola and Camille. We have the upcoming one with telemetry. It'd be great to have someone. I know Chinyu has already taken on some of the issues,
Yep.
having someone
Right.
pair up with him on that. So
yeah, definitely didn't mean to say we're not doing it at all. It's just like maybe even just like formalizing it a little bit more might just be helpful so that we understand. Like we had like a quarterly. I mean, we use Google Docs a lot. We can use a GitLab issue, whatever. Like it would have a quarterly overview that we regularly checked in on, where all these epics, I guess it would be here, were listed with the point pair names next to them. So that it's really easy to track them as well. Like in what state are they? Like how far are we away from shipping this and stuff? So it gives you a little bit of like a lightweight framework, I think.
Yeah, and folks can just be assigned to the epics too to make it clear what the
Yep, I think it will actually be way easier. Yes, I think it will be way easier to implement it here because we have much better tools than just Google Docs.
Yeah. Cool. And then Alexi, was there anything in your notes you want to verbalize? I read through it, and it looked like you were mostly agreeing with what Matthias had to say.
Yeah, I mean, my main point is to make like proper decision only on the engineering side. We need to get our metrics ready. This Northstar metrics, or like whatever we prefer to use to measure our team performance. Because for now, as I understand, we don't have it set, and it would allow us to make right decision without overpinging PMs or EMs. So I think we should prioritize that.
I think our Northstar metric is pretty well set, and we can adjust it as the quarter goes along if we find that there's a better measurement. Did you have a specific question about Northstar metric?
I mean, is it the only measurement of our team, like the one and the only, or we should have some extended metrics, which would also include like some non-just, because Northstar metrics is about memory, right? And as stated, we are working on performance as well.
Yep.
So it doesn't include, it's basically about memory.
It should include both a combination of the memory and CPU that we consume combined, divided by, well, the cost of them, basically. So it's trying to come up with more like an efficiency number, as in how efficient is GitLab.
Okay, but what about this urgent request, like CI minutes? I know that probably we've been involved because we have Camille on the team who like knows great amount about CI, but how do we try to tie it into our metrics, this work? Or is it just like separate work going aside from our main course of work?
Yeah, that was a urgent action that we needed to take to improve the cost, to reduce the amount of money we spend on GitLab.com. We're actually have a number of activities going on right now to try and do that. So to give you some context, we're spending, projected to spend, I think, $18 million on free users this year, which is too much. It's more than the money we're going to get back out from paid users. So we're taking a number of urgent actions to try to reduce that cost. So GitLab.com has more of a better business model behind it. So this was part of that actions, which is to enforce some limits on people so that you can't consume as much minutes as you want to on free projects. So that's what the backstory here was, and the CI team had other similarly high priority projects, and so we could help, and so we did. So it's a really important project. I hope these don't continue. I would like to try and shift to more proactive rather than the reactive. So I hope that this is an outlier as far as working outside of our main focus area.
Yeah, I think this whole like unplanned work is really hard. I don't know if it's useful to have a KPI for this, right? Because it's by definition unknown. Like it's unplanned work, right? So you don't really know what will happen next month. We might get another urgent request about something else. So is it maybe better we treat it more like we treat like tech debt, for instance, where we say we should just spend like X% of our time each month or so on working on these things, and just kind of like cut ourselves some time to do, just expect like allocate a certain bucket of time to just work on these things, whatever it may be, and then just like manage expectations by, hey, look, like this, we can only spend like 70-80% of our time on things that actually work towards the NSM.
I don't know that we need to get that, for lack of a better term, prescriptive or focused on like the percentage balance, because in my history that typically becomes an argument point, like, well, we spent 30% on X and now we need to spend the rest of our time on Y. So, and to answer another question that Alexi kind of asked, is that the only way we measure, I can't remember the exact wording, so is that our only measurement of success? No, like throughput are still important. The performance impact that we have are so important. They're just different levels that we look at how successful or productive we are as a team. So that's Northstar metric. Couldn't get any higher, right? That's why it's called the Northstar metric. That's the long-term goals for the team. So does that answer your question, Alexi?
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Okay. Yep. And we're going to kind of jump into the how here in a minute. But so there was a question about ensuring we balance on a regular basis with product management needs. So if as a team, we're driving a lot of the initiatives and breaking them down and working on these things, we need to make sure that Josh understands, like if we take on an initiative he'd never heard of, like we jump into an API because it's not performing, just making sure he understands why we're working on it and what the performance impact and how it benefits the company, so that if there's a competing need that's coming from the product management side, we can weigh the impact of the two and properly prioritize them. So does that make sense on that statement, what I was trying to get to there? Stunned silence.
Yeah, I think just to sort of talk a bit more about that, the PMs and GitLabs are the directly responsible individual, the DRI, for prioritizing work. So they are the sole owner and the person who is responsible for why we're working on the things that we're working on. That way, there's a clear owner of who does that. But that doesn't mean that there can't be input, there can't be ideas, there can't be strong suggestions from engineering as far as we think we should work on this because it'll have a high impact. Just that at the end of the day, if there's questions about why we're doing the things that we're doing, those questions go to the PM to respond as to why. So that's the current model of GitLab. But I do want to stress that even though that sounds like a big job, it's or that a lot of responsibility, or I would say control, is in the PM's hands. It's really just that to have a single person responsible, and I would hope and really it'd be great if we have a lot of ideas and opinions as far as what we should work on coming from the team. That would be amazing. But yeah, it serves as the way to try and make sure we're working on the things that we have to work on, at least at a high level, like directionally.
Camille, you had a suggestion there?
I mean, just like random suggestion, I'm quite experienced with GitLab. I have like some gut feeling about like where there are areas to improve, but like even that, like it's really hard to understand the exact impact. So like with everything, maybe like starting with the very rough and the simplest ever proof of concept prototype of what we are aiming for to understand the technical complexity and the impact could be useful to kind of weight the story, how it is important. Because like I'm kind of thinking like from the different angle, like the return of the investment. Like if something takes like, I don't know, 5 months to ship like, I don't know, twice improvement, where we can spend like 1 week to ship like this 10% improvement, but like to 10 of them doing that. It's still beneficial to do like these smaller improvements, but sometimes it's like doing like the bigger story. So maybe doing proof of concept prototype would better answer us like how much effort we have to invest to get a result out of that. Because like import export, it was very intriguing problem. We discovered a lot. Was it like something that like we could understand ahead of the time? I have no idea, but like some of the aspects, like I created a ton of issues. Like I created a ton of different random issues about random stuff that sometimes they just doesn't make sense. It's just like a hunch that like it seems something that is gonna be beneficial. Like trying to validate these issues like this in the fastest possible way to understand their impact could be kind of key to be effective, kind of focusing on basically ROI from kind of selfish perspective on time spent versus the impact of the changes. Because like there is so many things to fix at GitLab. Like I could get a hat and give you probably like 100 of the different things. Like if you go to any channel, you're probably gonna see a number of them. PM also have like a lot of ideas. Everyone has ideas once you start working with that. How to quickly figure out the one that they are more important than other. How to validate effort required.
I think it's a really sensible thing to say, but also one thing you have to keep in mind is that maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but it will probably take me 10 times as long as it takes you to prototype something to the extent that I can say, okay, well, I believe this is something we should pick up now, and I need to then make the decision every day. You know, am I just gonna basically go rogue for a couple of days, you know, and work on this random thing that I had an idea of, but that wasn't really in the planning backlog? So if this is something we want to do, I'm definitely for it. But I think right now I would hesitate to do it because it's still hard sometimes to say upfront how much time I will have to spend on it, and I would feel like I would have to justify it somehow, you know, because I wouldn't be working on things that we had agreed on working on in the planning backlog. I think that is my main hesitation.
I mean, like it's like interesting point, but like I kind of perceive proof of concept as like kind of speedy learning, like approach. Like it's much faster, like to learn with that on like the broadest possible extent, because like you are not trying to get everything perfect in order to get it merged.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to understand like how it works, what is deficient.
Right.
It may take initially more time, but the more I'm thinking like for us to be successful and effective, like we need to touch as many broad items as possible to understand like the patterns within application. And in order to achieve that, at least from my perspective, it's like to work and fix these items, or like try to like prototype and understand different deficiencies. Like initially it's always good, it's hard. Like if you start something new, it's hard, but maybe over time, it's so familiar to this other part. It's like, it's pretty straightforward. Like if you hit another time n+1 problem, I actually did that, it did work, it didn't work, maybe something like that. So I'm kind of thinking like at the approach that would make us to touch as many bases from one angle, but on the other angle allow us to wait what is like maybe important aspect. Because like getting things across finish line, it's pretty challenging to get.
Yeah.
Because like you need to meet expectations of all stakeholders to get something across finish line. Some maybe less through or like have the lower expectations, but like it's pretty hard.
Okay. Thank you for all the feedback. I think So my goal for this was to make sure that it's explicit, that we all understand that we are very much owners of the backlog, and breaking it down and making sure it's understandable, actionable, and we can move forward on it. I think it seems like we're all in agreement there, and we're starting to jump into the how we can do this. So let's move on to the how portion of it. Lots of good suggestions. So I focused, I was probably too specific on this. I probably should have just said planning, but I focused on the planning issue. There's a lot of really good feedback on the usefulness or lack thereof of the planning issue and participation levels. And I tried to summarize down here. No, I'm sorry, that was the meetings. So planning issue, the general feedback was lack of participation. It gets stale. It doesn't always match what we're working on in the milestone, which is fine if I'm answering that specific question. The planning, so for me, the planning issue when Josh and I are looking at is we're trying to align the next milestone, right? And often things like CI minutes or like import was kind of a rapid action thing that came in and kind of shuffled what we were working on for the current and subsequent milestones. So to me, it's completely okay that we plan something and then it changes at the last minute. So yes, the issue is going to get stale. My concern is not a lot of collaboration has happened in the past. It's typically been kind of a one way. Josh and I putting in issues in there and then getting feedback from the team, what should I work on next? So I would like it to be more collaborative. I know there was a suggestion in there to use a Google Doc to be more collaborative. My concern about Google Docs, and it's in the handbook, right? Using issues for discussions, because it's more visible, it's more searchable. To Alexi's point, you get pings on it when there's updates, and yeah, those are my thoughts on the planning issue. If there's a better way to do planning, I'm all for it.
Right.
But I would just like to get more involvement from the team on how we plan for subsequent milestones.
Definitely. Sorry, on the Google Docs thing, because it came from me. Like, I think I just worded that poorly. I don't think Google Docs is a better tool for like brainstorming on this. I think as long as we're clear on, I'm all for doing this on GitLab, but maybe I think that my main point was it wasn't clear to me like where to pull in work from. Like, was it the backlog or was it this planning issue? Because they weren't really aligned anymore. So maybe what we can do is we can still have the planning issue, but once we have a defined backlog, we close it out. Because otherwise, I think it's just confusing to have like two sources of truth. And I guess the reason I mentioned Google Doc is because we say we deprecate the Google Docs when we after like you start out with the Google. I think that is actually in the handbook somewhere. You can start out in a Google Doc as kind of like a draft space, and then you like deprecate it and move it over into an issue. But like we don't have to do this. We can totally do it all in an issue.
Oh, I agree. Google Docs are much easier to collaborate on. They're less clunky when you want to update and just quickly drop something in there.
Yeah, and they have live editing, which we not yet have, but maybe we'll have it soon on GitLab.
Yeah. So I think the main feedback was mostly don't look at the planning issues. So how do we get better about milestone +1 planning, regardless of the
do I understand correctly that we should close the planning issue on the day the milestone starts? For example, the planning issue from for 13.1 should be closed on the first day.
Yep.
Okay.
Anything else we need to cover on the planning portion and using planning issues? All right, take that as a no. And I have a hard stop at 6:50. All right, so on to meetings and how we can improve them. I think I summarized this one. So lots of good feedback here again as well. Thank you. So suggestions. moving company updates to async. So a couple thoughts there. We do have the section in the doc, so we can just skip over that and not even verbalize it at all. So we're not using time on that. Or I've seen other teams, they just have a, within Slack, they'll do, one of the managers does like a Friday summary, like here's all the updates, or we can do both, right? Multimodal communication. So any thoughts or suggestions on that? What do people prefer? No preference. All right.
I think it sounds good.
Okay. It seemed like the preference in all the feedback there was to focus on walking the wall and time boxing and making sure that we're spending some good quality time there. Also reviewing unassigned seems to have gotten some good feedback. I like Camille's suggestion on having like a monthly recap of closed items. And my suggestion there maybe on release day. What do people think about that? So celebrating closed items, not doing it during the team meeting because we're already cramped for time on that one.
But both working as well. Do you understand the idiom correctly? Because I'm not sure I heard it ever. I mean, does it mean just go through all the tickets? But
yeah,
to be honest,
for the milestone.
I mean, isn't it useful for us? I mean, if we are not touching closed here, what's the point that I will tell you that I'm working on it? Probably, I mean, because every issue that we are going to announce will be, I'm working on it, And
yeah, this is
I
kind
mean,
of a reformulation of the question I had. Is it like, is the main purpose of the meeting to give a recorded update to other stakeholders? Because then I think it's useful. But if it's just to update ourselves, that could also just happen on like asynchronously on the issues themselves.
yeah,
as long as
because
we think it's like good to talk about blockers face to face, then we want to quickly sort out.
because from my perspective, I would rather like to hear not from ticket to ticket, but from person to person, to hear most important like stuff. For example, like Alexei, I'm working on this milestone. It's in this state. Possible challenges like this, and not like go through all my mini tickets I created to like handle every small aspect of my epic, because like nobody is so deep down in the story. So I mean, I would rather it to serve as a like call for help or maybe call for discovery, some possible collaborations, and like going through my tickets. I don't know.
I can agree with you. I would maybe add here, like if I'm out at work, any suggestions what to pick next, pick up next, or if I'm blocked or need to pair with someone, I can like talk about it. But I also don't see the point of going to all of those small issues, because most of us, like, there is also a stand-up chat with in Slack channels, so we are pretty much up to date, like what we are doing.
Okay. Yeah, and I think
Yeah, I mean, if we would have more structured epics after what Matthias mentioned, like with point pairs, maybe we could go through point pairs and they will quickly like give some update on progress of the particular epic on a higher perspective, so everyone would feel like more involved. Then probably you would not understand like small details about my issue fixing some specs because it's not that interesting to you.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. So I think we might have to extend the meeting then, because we're like 6 people or so. So even if everyone takes 5 minutes, that's already busting the 25-minute time frame. So yeah, that's my only concern. It will be longer, but we can try it. And we should then definitely be okay. Maybe 5 minutes is way too long anyway. Maybe everyone should only get like 2 minutes tops.
okay. So is this a good description then? Progress update by person or point pairs, including blockers? So instead of walking the wall, let the people or point pairs decide what they want to recap on a weekly basis.
I like it personally.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, I like the person focus. Yeah, I like it. So as long, maybe with one footnote, I've been in a lot of stand-ups in the past where it was person focused, but those were daily stand-ups, so maybe that's not comparable. But what I don't like is this kind of stand-up format where that I know from stand-ups where you do not even look at the board, but you just go around in a circle and everyone says, oh, yesterday I worked on X and today I want to work on X. So because that's usually when people go into extreme detail that is completely not interesting to the other people in the circle. And that is also something that is, I think, better done asynchronously, outside maybe of like blockers or something. But if it's like a general update also on other interesting things that might not be on the board even, then I think that might be a really interesting thing to do.
Yeah, I agree. And I think like going ticket by ticket have a bigger risk to jumping into like extreme boring details than going epic by epic, because everyone at least familiar with epic and should be familiar with epic or like point pair epic.
Okay. So the one thing I would ask then is for people or point pairs to update before the meeting and just give a quick summary so that we're not doing it live, or I don't have to ask. You just go around, all right, who's next? So, okay, I will restructure the doc so that it reflects what we talked about here. Anything else on the Monday meetings? So, and to a couple folks, I think Nicola brought it up first, but recapping unassigned. So ensuring that the unassigned issues are top down in priority order so that it's clear what folks can work on next. And that should be a part of the regular meeting as well. So, and then monthly, yep, I can set that up. What do people feel about the monthly recapping the closed items? So not do it in a weekly meeting, but having a monthly just chat as a team around this time or whatever time works best for Jinyu and everybody to get together and celebrate closed items, talk about the milestone. I put in the suggestion for the 22nd because that's release date. Yep.
Should then an unassigned go into Wednesday meeting, Wednesday planning, if the planning you mean like milestone planning or something like this?
Maybe, and we can talk about that next. So, yep. Yeah. All right, thank you. So I'll get all that set up. So would I.
Yes, we could do it earlier. I mean,
thank you.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Planning. So we haven't actually gotten to any planning. We've mostly focused on how we function as a team, and I'm sure we didn't cover everything. So, and we only have a limited time here. So if there's anything we didn't cover, let's talk about it asynchronously. We can keep adding it to this. So planning. The suggestion was out there that we have more, and this came from me, more synchronous planning discussions. I think it would be helpful to me. If it's not helpful to anybody else, then let's not do it. And yes, to Matthias' question, when you first joined, thought Monday meeting was the planning meeting. It's not intended to be. It's more of an update on what's going on in the milestone, what folks are working on. Do they need any help? Do they need clarity on what they're working on next? So Josh and I have largely been doing the planning through the issue and talking together and trying to get feedback from folks. But with the explicit agreement that this team is owning, defining the epics, breaking them down and making sure they're actionable, just trying to figure out how we can get together and make sure it's happening in a productive way. So if it's not synchronous meetings, how do we want to do this? And this might take longer than the 12 minutes that we have left. But again, we can do it asynchronously. So any ideas on how we can start discussing planning for the next milestone and make sure we have a clear picture and it's prioritized and everybody understands, like if we're doing the point pairs or who is responsible for what and how we actually start breaking down issues and epics.
So I think my take would be if we have already identified several items that we know need to be broken down and that we would like to focus on, and assuming we have like these point people who have already assigned themselves to a particular work stream, I think it should all be in these individual work streams. So I think that was my point here, is to say, but honestly, like I would of course want to know what you think about it. It's just that in my past experience, like these meetings where you have a lot of people in the room and talk about like 5 different things just because it's the planning meeting for everyone, I find them to be not effective. And it's often like people zoning out, and then because, oh, I know I'm not going to work on this anyway, or they just maybe not have a particular opinion on that one or whatever. So that's why I prefer this, like working in these well-defined lanes, like where, let's say Camille and Chinyo work together on, or like now Chinyo and I, we just picked up this telemetry stuff, right? But some stories still need to be groomed. So what I would prefer is that Chinyo and I, we try to wrap our head around this thing, try to groom all the tickets, and then we go back to the team with a more specific proposal for how to do this. And then we can more like ask, is anyone interested in like, you know, giving feedback to this? You know, look, here's our suggestion. What do you think about it? Do you have like points around this that, you know, you want to point out that doesn't make sense or we should be doing differently? Or does anyone else want to, you know, pick these up and work on them? Right. So more like, yeah, not just like get everyone in a room and then talk about 5 different things, but like here are the things we work on. And then we have DRIs and they kind of drive this and they get other people's feedback, whether that's asynchronously or synchronous, I think can be decided on a like individual basis, because sometimes it might be good enough for people to just, you know, leave feedback in the issue. And sometimes if it gets like too back and forth, then we can always like Zoom or something. Like it's like these standing meetings, I would like to keep them to a minimum, to be honest.
Agreed. Yeah. Yeah, and the way to avoid that unnecessary folks in synchronous meetings, I've done it in the past, is you have an agenda, right? And if you're not part of the agenda, you don't show up. But it seems like I was the only one that thought this would be a good idea, so let's not do it. And we'll figure out how we assign the DRIs. And I like that term for the epics and initiatives. So it's not, you know, one or the other, it's not single person or point pairs, but DRIs for the initiatives, and then they can figure out how to further break it down and how to get the rest of the team involved, instead of just having a prescriptive methodology of we meet every Wednesday to talk about these things. So that's a good suggestion. Anything else to cover here? Okay. So the weekly cadence is something I've done with other teams in the past, rather than, because a milestone's a long time, right? A month, you can lose focus on the goals. It didn't, I agree with Matthias' comment, like it's been difficult with teams in the past, and I can't remember who said it was cringy. But trying to set, I wasn't trying to set like a high level goal. It was more of like, okay, on import, I'm going to try to finish X by the end of the week. And we've already talked about how we're going to do the Monday meeting, so we can exclude that. I think the timeline would be helpful. And I've actually started putting together in a different doc spreadsheet, like what are the milestones within a milestone? What do we need to focus on? Bring that over. And this came from the Matthias' suggestion about how many days are left in the milestone. So just trying to figure out when we need to do these things on a regular basis. So creating the next milestone planning issue, I can link this doc in if it's helpful, or y'all can just throw suggestions in here. Release post items a week before. One thing we haven't done on a regular basis is reviewing OKRs. It's something we need to do. I just picked the end of the month because we're doing this on a quarterly basis. Making sure we set deliverables and making sure we have that beverage chat to celebrate close. So are there other milestones within a milestone that we should be mindful of that I missed? All right, if anybody thinks of any, just feel free to throw them in here. So we have 5 minutes left. I don't think we're going to get to much of the roadmap, but there is a roadmap doc that I put down here, and it's right here. Take a look, and we can talk about that asynchronously. But with the 5 minutes that I have left, are there any other topics, like just how we function as a team, how anything that people want to throw out that we can talk about quickly or even talk about asynchronously?
This is a really small question, but it's kind of a follow-up because I think I suggested it a while ago. Do we feel like this whole planning lane is useful at all on our board? Because I feel like we never really ended up using it at all. I think the idea was that we kind of, if there's, I guess we would use it to like backfill the backlog with stuff that's not super well defined yet, and then we move it across the board. But I feel like we haven't really been using it much. It's kind of a small thing, but like, if we feel like it doesn't work, we can just get rid of it, I guess. You know what I mean? Like we have this, what is it called? Planning breakdown? I don't even remember. Sorry, I don't have the board.
Yeah, I'm not using it.
We probably should.
I think it's called problem validation, or one of these labels. There's a bunch of workflow labels. I think use. I think I only ever end up using in dev and in review, basically.
Yeah.
Or at least in 90% of the cases.
I agree with you that we should consider doing more of the following more of the product development workflow that's been defined. And so that would include having the problem validation, solution validation, and earlier steps that then goes into problem breakdown.
And what about the quad planning? Because that's also not really on the board. Like, is this? I've been really bad at like involving this. I admit the quad planning stuff.
Yeah, I just on the topic of the product development flow, I'm happy to. I should do a better job of moving them through the validation phases. Problem validation would be a bit strange here since we're not as customer focused, as in we're not trying to build the next new thing our customers need. But solution validation and thereon would definitely be applicable. But if folks want, if you're all for it, I'm totally happy to start putting more issues up at front and working through the process. It would be good for our metrics as well, because then more of our stuff will show up in the engineering process, metrics that get collected. Are people interested in following that?
I mean, like I said, I haven't used it much because I didn't find it super useful. But I'm also not against doing it. Like, if it's useful to you, then sure, let's go for it. We could also do something lightweight, like if something is like a story is ungroomed. I think actually Craig did this right with the telemetry stuff. That we now have these, I don't know what we call them, like the needs attention flag, like these kind of little heads ups that you can.
Oh, the health status. Yeah, that's part of the new.
Yeah, that's kind of neat. I like that because then it kind of pops out a bit more, that like, oh, this needs to be looked at. And then developers can fill in the details.
Yeah, and where that.
I mean, I'm okay with also attaching a label to it. I just haven't done it so far because I personally don't find it useful. But like, if people say we should do it, I'm fine with that, of course.
Yeah, that's something. Sorry, I was looking for that workflow board. I think it's been deleted because we didn't use it anymore. But I'm happy to set that back up if folks find it valuable. The health status, it's particularly effective at the epic level because you can see all the related issues and where they are, and they should all start out in this need attention status. So yeah, sorry, forgot where I was going with that one, but yes, it is valuable. All right, I have to run here in a minute, so I have a bunch of action items I need to do. Please take a look at the roadmap, and then this format is horrible. Let's do it a different way. This is just something similar that I've used in the past. And Josh, if you want to take a look at these and make sure they're in priority order, because they're not right now, like telemetry should be up higher.
Sure.
And then let's talk about this. I think people can start adding comments and talk about how useful or not useful this is. If there's a better way to do it, let's do it. But with us owning the roadmap and breaking things down, we need to find a way to adequately communicate what we're working on now and what the next big topics are. And we didn't get into the topic of t-shirt sizing, but I think it'll be valuable to help us. And we can actually start using the roadmap feature within GitLab. And the way to do that is on the Epic, you set the due date, and then you can actually go and review the roadmap and how long things will take us, and we'll have a rough timeline of what we're working on. So. All right. Well, thanks everybody. And I will summarize in this doc all of the follow-up items.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See ya.